Hello and welcome back to New Paradigm Healing. This series focuses on Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy. Our intention is to educate, inform, and support the conscious and responsible use of ayahuasca in the Western context. If you want to know more about Ayahuasca Assisted Therapy and our upcoming trainings and workshops, sign up for our mailing list to be the first one to know about the latest news at avatarhealingarts.com. Hi, beautiful people. This is Nina Izel, and I'm super happy to be back with the next podcast, sending lots of love to you wherever you are in the world. And I'm here today with Dr. Scott Irwin, who is just has amazing wisdom and experience regarding this amazing medicine and other healing modalities as well. So I'm very, very excited to dive into a conversation with him today. I hope you're going to enjoy. So here we go. Welcome, Scott. It's so nice to have you here. You are in Colombia right now.
In Ecuador. Hi, Nina. Hi, Nina.
Ecuador.
Yeah, Ecuador. Yeah, very close.
Why I think it's Colombia? I don't know.
Yeah,
in my mind, it was Colombia.
South America. Yeah, South America.
And you just moved there recently, right?
Yeah, I'm down in an area very close to Puyo, which is the kind of more southern central area in the rainforest here, and working with an indigenous tribe, they're known as the Kichwa tribe. And they live in a cultural community named Sachawasi, and so I've been down here working with them, both from helping rebuild their infrastructure for their community, which depends on cultural tourism for their main income, and as well as doing medicine retreats down here.
That's awesome. So let's start with a little bit your story. Like, how did you end up, working with this medicine and eventually in Ecuador, where you are right now? If you want to just, tell us a little bit about your journey.
My journey. Okay. Well, I guess just my background. I mean, just generally speaking, I'm kind of at this intersection between modern functional medicine and leading edge psychology and ancient spiritual traditions and the sacred plant medicines of the Amazon. And so I had got a degree, a PhD in transpersonal psychology, and another doctorate in psychotherapy. And I've been in this, in the field of the helping field for a couple of decades, and my specialties were in transpersonal psychology, functional medicine, blood chemistry analysis, naturopathic medicine, therapeutic laser, complementary alternative medicine, and then this led me to the plant medicine. And I had been at the School of Medicine at the University of Miami in the Department of Family Medicine and Community Health, and also the Division of Integrative and Complementary Medicine. And I had a patient that came to me who actually was a physician, and he asked me, or he was actually kind of bragging about his upcoming 50th ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica. And I was like, what? And I didn't know this was over 5 years ago. And I hadn't heard about it. And, I had, with my specialty in alternative medicine and spirituality, it's like, I should know about this stuff. And, he was explaining ayahuasca and how it's this Amazonian brew, this tea, and you drink it and it tastes terrible. And it, it gives you visions, but it makes you purge, and it could get diarrhea and all this stuff. And I thought, oh my God, this sounds terrible. This sounds awful. And 50 of these, I'm like, I didn't understand. And so I just kind of wrote him off as maybe somebody that had been to, too many of the Burning Man festivals that they have, and probably did too many tabs of acid. And he was probably one of those, psychonauts. And I certainly wasn't. And then a couple of weeks later, I had a patient that had come to me who had just had a baby. And this baby was born with a significant birth defect. And so she had come to me very, very much concerned about how was she going to be the best possible mother for this child who would most certainly have a difficult childhood. So what happened was she had asked me, do I know of this place in Orlando? Nelly, is it escucha la noise más despacio? Sí. Let's see. I'm sorry. My Spanish is not very good, and the people here have been so helpful in helping me. So anyway, she had asked me if I knew about this place up in Orlando, Florida, called Soul Quest, Ayahuasca Church of Mother Earth, where they consume this medicine. And I'm like, this ayahuasca stuff. And I'm like, this is so odd. This is twice in the same month. I'm hearing about this plant medicine, and I'd never heard about it before. So, I did what most people usually do when they are curious about this kind of stuff, is you go to Google and try to figure out how to spell ayahuasca. And then I did all that research, and I'm like, oh my God, if this plant medicine is anything like what everyone says in these, these testimonies and these documentaries, then I knew a lot of people, patients that could benefit from this type of medicine. And so I dug into it pretty deeply and started researching, and went to my first ayahuasca experience up at SoulQuest. This was 5 years ago in April. What I experienced in my very first weekend changed the entire trajectory of my career. What I saw was, what most people that are familiar with plant medicine, remarkable changes in people. It was like what, people often say, 5, 10, 15 years of psychotherapy in a weekend. And I saw that, and I was blown away. And I'm like, this is it. This is a an area that I really wanted to focus in. And so I got involved with the organization. Now, SoulQuest is in Orlando, Florida, and I'm no longer with SoulQuest, but SoulQuest was considered probably the largest ayahuasca church in the United States. They've had over 20,000 individuals who have come to sit with the medicine there with their shaman and their ayahuasqueros. And they had actually had a docu-series on Netflix called Unwell. And it's in episode 5 about ayahuasca and the American version of it. And so I became the senior minister at SoulQuest eventually, and really began to become one of the leaders in the organization, and did a lot of integration development of the programs there, did the church services, really emphasized the medical screening process for safety, and that's kind of those standards. And so that's kind of what led me to getting involved with the medicine. And then every weekend we'd have retreats with 60 to 100 individuals working with the medicine. So that's a lot. And then we would have the aftercare program with up to 26 free post-ceremony integration style groups that were available for people to help them work with the medicine, integrate. I thought it was such an important part. And then I decided that it was time to go. So the idea of coming to Ecuador really appealed to me. This idea that working in the place where ayahuasca is a national treasure in Amazon, in Ecuador, in the Amazon here, it's celebrated nationally, and there's so much respect for it. In the United States, we've just been going through a huge battle with the government on our legalization process, and they determined that we weren't going to get an exemption to be able to do ayahuasca. And so I thought that was the time that I needed to leave, because I didn't want to do anything illegal. So I decided to come down to Ecuador.
That's awesome. I love that. Like, I'm making notes, so while we are speaking.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that that's really been driving this for me, is the importance of our indigenous tribes. And I don't think in the United States we have an appreciation for that. And so as part of what I'm trying to do is bring awareness to, just to the needs of indigenous communities. You know, the Sachuasi comunidad in Pomona, Pastanza, Ecuador, is the tribe I'm working with and the community I'm working with. And, you know, tourism, you know, is what's, you know, often stated as a source of cultural erosion. And, you know, anybody that's been working intimately with any of the indigenous tribes, like the one I'm working with Sachuasi, you know, it's just the opposite. You know, it's really this cultural tourism has really rekindled their interests in preserving their traditional ways of life. You know, these folks are demonstrating the ways of their elders and their ancestors to foreigners, you know, through their ceremonies and through their apprenticeships, and this really generates like a lot of pride and motivation in the younger members to preserve their way of life. You know, this is an ancient way, and if they don't have their means to sustain themselves, then, you know, and it's kind of pretty poor down here. They're going to have to leave their tribal communities and go into towns and cities and find work to feed their families, and they have big families down here. So that's part of my goal is to really support the community here so that they are self-sufficient. And we've been doing a lot of infrastructure improvements. You've been seeing some of that on Facebook.
Yeah,
And
I love it. And we're gonna share when we post this episode, all the links where people can donate and get involved with this project. Is so important that we give back, you know, and we are, I think, very used to in the West just taking, you know, and not giving back. So thank you for doing this service, and it's very wonderful. I want to go back to the beginning and just, I had a question because yourself mentioned as well that you were trained in many different healing modalities, you know, and you had just expanded your toolbox. And certainly I really resonate with that. That's how I started as a psychologist, having a master's in psychology, and then to go into alternative healing, especially breath work, and Dr. Stanislav Grof, you know, the holotrope, and then different types of breath work.
I trained with him. Yeah.
Oh my God.
In Czechoslovakia. Yeah.
Yeah, he's my hero. And it's like, he's like next to my country. I'm from Hungary. So it's like some good people came out from Eastern Europe, I think. And Dr. Gabor Mate, also Hungarian.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
another
Hungarian
pioneer in healing and addiction and trauma healing. So, and healing with the medicine also. I would love to have him as a guest at one point. Hopefully that will happen. But my question is that, you know, often say that healers, we walk this path of the wounded healer, and we become healers because we are looking for our own cure, you know, and to heal ourselves and to feel better. And this was certainly true for me. You know, I went towards this path because early in my life, I really knew very deeply that, well, first I thought there is something wrong with me, but then I just realized, you know, that a lot of things happened to me that affected me, you know, on a deep level, and that had consequences in my everyday life. So certainly, while I always had this sense of serving other people, it was first my own quest, and this is how I get to the medicine as well. When I went to Peru, that I wanted it for my healing and my self-development, and at that point I didn't consider to bring it into my practice. So do you resonate with this concept of the wounded healer, and do you want to share a little bit about this journey and how the medicine specifically helped you or changed your life, and if it did, in what way?
Yeah, what a great question. Yeah, you know, it was Swami Satchidananda, who was the Woodstock guru who came to the United States from India in the mid 60s, and in his great wisdom, and I'm a big fan of his. He's no longer with us, but I just love his body of work. You know, he said that the mind is the mirror of the soul, and the body is a mirror of the mind. And if your mind is not reflecting your sacredness, your immeasurable love, your immortal being, essentially, then you have a dirty mind. And the ayahuasca, if you will, is kind of like this window cleaner, this Windex that cleanses that mirror of the mind, so it reflects the truth within, the truth about who we really are. And so I'm one of these people that along my journey arrived at the understanding, my belief is that we are already whole. We are already perfect. We are already complete, whereas the Creator created us. However, we understand this notion of creation, and that it is the clouded thinking that blocks the awareness of this fundamental truth. And so it was through the work of, as a therapist, and, I've worked with 25,000 patients over the years. I've, healed myself with every one of those, patients that I've worked with. I see myself in every one of them. And for me, it was in childhood. I was a very sensitive child, very highly sensitive and very overreactive to punishment and the conditions of childhood. My parents were very loving, but my father was very strict and stern, and I took a lot of things personally. And for some, like Gabor Mate, he talks about trauma. Trauma is not necessarily that, that you had a gun held to your head and you were a hostage for 14 days. That's traumatic. Trauma is when something is, overwhelming, so overwhelming inside. And for me, my childhood was extremely overwhelming at times. And in that overwhelming moment, I separated from myself. Like Freud said, the very definition of neurosis and psychosis, the separation from self. And in that separation, I created this persona, this adaptation to my true self. And that was my surviving self, which is not my authentic self. And so I went through many years of compensation and living out this other self. And, I ended up at one point in time in my life, I was married and I had a son, and I was the vice president of a $2.4 billion Norwegian utility company building renewable energy power plants. And I realized at this point in time in my life that this is not me, that I am not this guy. Before that, I had a number of business. I had a business that commercialized advanced industrial technologies out of the Pentagon and NASA. And, this is not me, who I am, who I know myself to be truly now. And, it was along this path of trial and error, trial and error, that I finally figured out that what I'm doing in my life is not working. And I am, putting these ideas out there into the universe because I think that they, those other people out there, my community, my family, the other people, we become other focused people pleasers. My whole life was about that, because what I learned very, very early on is that I don't matter. And this is how I arrived at that. I'm 4 years old. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And, my dad comes home, and I was all excited because I heard that the Wizard of Oz was going to be coming on TV. And, this is back in the 60s, and the Wizard of Oz was fun. I knew all the songs, we're off to see the wizard and all that stuff. And my dad comes home and says, no, we're watching Gunsmoke. And I was traumatized. I was like, we cry, and it's like, no, and it's like, probably got whacked or something. And I remember making a key decision that day. And that key decision was, what I want doesn't matter. And then I went further with it because, we replay these moments in our heads and exaggerate them, make them worse. And I took it further, and I went, I don't matter. And I took that faulty thinking and the emotions that went with it all the way through my childhood and my, adolescence and my early adulthood and into my adulthood. And everything I did was a result of this disconnection from the idea that I mattered. If I didn't matter, who mattered? Right? That meant that they mattered. My ex-wife mattered. My father or my community or my friends in high school, they all matter. What they think of me matters. And so it took years for me to reach that point where
lost you.
You lost me?
Okay, you're back.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, perfect.
What part did you lose me at?
that you internalize, and you said that
Yeah.
I don't matter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it took years for me to work through that. And it wasn't until I actually started to do the deeper work that it really was the foundation that set me up to go further with the plant medicine. And so, it wasn't until I was much older that I was introduced to the ayahuasca, and what it did for me was that final step, that final step. In my early 20s, I went to college at UCLA in Los Angeles, and my host family, my surrogate family, were very interesting people. And it was Jeremy Tarcher, who was the largest West Coast book publisher, and Sherry Lewis, which was an entertainer with Lamb Chop. And these were my mentors and my guides. And at that time, Jeremy, I had a job with Jeremy, and we were working on Timothy Leary's autobiography. And we were at the Hollywood Bowl, and we were having a symphony outing with the picnic and everything that they do there. And Jeremy's talking to me about the difference between having faith and knowing God. And he was telling me that the difference is LSD, trying LSD, trying acid, using, these medicines. And at that time in my life, I'm like, I'm from Nebraska. That's not right. We don't do that. So, but after working with Tim Leary on his book for a while, I started to lean into it. And I had my very first LSD experience from Tim Leary, and it was amazing. And so that gave me that needed push later on, when I found out that ayahuasca can do the next step, which is have a direct experience with the supreme being, or the supreme, or the God, or the source, or whatever it was. And that's where I felt I was at that moment. I'd done my work. I felt like I'd grown a lot. I'd psychologically oriented to a lot of issues, but I wanted to have the direct experience. Like, I wanted to know God. And I'd remembered what Jeremy had told me, when I was 20, 22 or whatever it was, that there's a difference, and that these kinds of medicines can do that. And sure enough, that's what happened.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. I love, I have so many questions, and so many things that I can deeply relate to. One of them is this concept that you were talking about, that disease or being unwell is because of separation and disconnection from our true self.
Right.
And I was invited recently to a group, and the topic we talked about was like, what does it mean to be a man? And the whole conversation was escalating from what does it mean to be a man, of like, what does it mean to be a human, really? And then from there, what does it mean to be, not to be a human? Because I feel the same way, that we are born like a shining diamond, already perfect and whole and divine. And then my metaphor is that during life is layers of shit is like piled on that diamond. And then you forget that you are that diamond, and you think that you are the pile of shit, and that is that type of disconnection what we are talking about. And certainly in my journey, as I was coming from psychology through the holistic modalities, it was this search for this connection, and I keep learning new modalities, new stuff all the time. And people were like, you're so overqualified now, why are you learning? And I'm like, no, something is still missing, and when I ended up, coming to the medicine, it was like, wow, this was that missing step, that connected me with source, because all the other modalities helped me with the mental, emotional realms and go into the unconscious and so on and so forth. But I grew up in a communist country, so I grew up without religion, without spirituality. So there was like just this big void for me. I didn't even have concepts of the divine, or what does that mean. And suddenly, when I came to work with the ayahuasca that I had the direct experience. As you said, it is not a mental concept, it's not an intellectual knowing that, yeah, we are all one and there is source and all that, but like experiencing that connectedness, experiencing your divinity, experiencing that source, and experiencing who you are under that pile of shit, that was put on, or, built on during the years. So, I always say to people that for me, healing is returning to our natural state of wholeness, is a returning, is a remembering. It's nothing that you need to acquire or put or search outside and put in. You already are. The problem is that our conditionings, trauma, mental constructs are disconnecting us from that essence. And I believe what this medicine can do very well is to help us to reconnect, to help us to remember and return to that original state and let go of what you are not. As you were saying, you realize, I'm not this, I am not that, I'm not the anger, I'm not the career, I'm not this title, I'm not this. So just letting go of this so we can be just stepping into this more authentic self of who we already are. And this is so beautiful. And I just want to communicate to your audience that also what you mentioned, that you had a great deal of preparation. You did some lots of internal work on yourself. You did have tools, you did have practices that you already
and my PhD has a lot of specialization in inner child work. I think that's vital.
Absolutely. I'm
Vital.
so resonating with that. We are just actually doing the next episode about that on the podcast. So stay tuned for Healing the Inner Child. And just, for people who are considering to work with this medicine, what's your perspective on that? This is not for everybody. This is kind of like a warrior path, and to go into this world without any kind of knowing or preparation or having any kind of tools or support system might not be for the benefit of certain individuals. So what is your perspective on this?
So yeah, I always say that, just like I'm not everybody's cup of tea as a therapist, ayahuasca and other plant medicines, not necessarily that individual's path. We're all coming at this life with free will. We get to explore and suss out all the different adventures that we feel led to. And I never would have imagined sitting with an indigenous tribe in a smoky moloka, getting beat with these, leaves and spit on with this spray in Olympia right before an ayahuasca ceremony with my shirt off, and and seeing lights inside my head and spinning because the energy is so great. I never would have imagined that. And nor me sitting in a place, I'm from Nebraska. Nebraska is in middle of the United States. It's very conservative, very normal, all American, apple pie, and you just don't get to cross paths like that. And so I think that one of the things that happens with this medicine is you get a calling. Something triggers you, something speaks to you about it. And for me, the call had to do with the higher realms, the spiritual divine nature of the medicine. It's called the vine of death, which is death, rebirth. Some have call it the vine of the soul. So I think that it's not for everybody. Of course, the contraindicated medications, your selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, your antidepressants, your certain mental illnesses are excluded. Those people who I think are very serious about relieving themselves of deep trauma might really find ayahuasca or plant medicine to be the catalyst that they need to heal themselves. I always say there is no shaman, there is no guru, there is no doctor, and there is no medicine that is going to heal you. Right? And you have these people that spend, you spend like, we are doing these retreats down here and they cost like $2,500. And it's like, no amount of money that you spend is going to heal you. Right? It's you that's got to heal you, because you are the only one that can do that. And so you have to have I think a desire, one, to heal. Like there's, a thing of spiritual bypassing that happens with a lot of people. They get on a spiritual path and they want everything to be all kumbaya and all yummy and all sweet. And, and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you start swearing, you become a real asshole. And it's like, oh, I'm spiritual, I can't be that way. Well, guess what? That's your shadow. And so it's like, you got to be brave enough and strong enough to look into your shadow. And the shadow is the stuff you don't want to admit, the stuff that you don't want people to see. It's your dark side, your secretiveness, your private, your private stuff, right? And so, I think that a person that comes to this kind of medicine needs to have enough spiritual strength or knowledge or whatever it is to face the shadow. And which is, if you find out your shadow is driving right now in the front seat, it's a matter of taking control back and saying, you, my angry self, you're in the back seat, I'm in charge. I have this holistic system that I've been working with for years that I think simplifies it so well. And so that when a person comes to the medicine, ultimately it realigns them with their chooser. And so, you have your physical body, your meat sack, right, with all its appetites and desires and urges and all that. And then you have your emotional body, and then you have your mental body. Now, your emotional body is that accumulation of all your feelings, good and bad, in your whole life. When you think about like your memory banks, it's like 80% of them in your brain, or roughly something like that, are designed to store negative memories, right? You can have like, 12 great things happen to you in a day and one bad thing happens. And what do you suppose you talk about at dinner? The one bad thing. And so the emotional body is another part. And then the mental body, remember that part of you? I don't know if you grew up believing in Santa Claus, but I sure did. And we have this part of us that most of us really don't have a relationship with. And that's the chooser. It was Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, that really helped us understand, this concept so well. And ultimately, it is up to us, the chooser, to decide between fear and love and action and non-action, this sort of thing. And this is where the game is won or lost. And, Viktor Frankl taught us, in the Auschwitz and the Nazi concentration camps, 24 out of 25 prisoners would die. And, and he gave us insights, when they take everything from you, right? They take your hair, right? They take your name and they tattoo a number on your arm. They took his life's work. They murdered his family. They took everything from him. And what he taught us, and he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning, which sold millions of copies. What he said was, when they take everything from you, all you have left is how you choose to respond to the circumstances in your life. And this is where we have to get to, is that I am the chooser. I'm responsible. I was the 4-year-old that chose to believe this thought, I don't matter. Right? I'm the chooser. And so therefore I'm responsible for my healing. I'm responsible for every action that I've reacted to, or every reaction that I've had, and every thought that I've accepted into my being. And so physical body, emotional body, mental body, and chooser, so important. Now, when we look at these first three, the physical body, emotional body, mental body, those are really what we call the ego. And, I love Wayne Dyer. Wayne Dyer said the ego stands for edge God out, right? And so this is really the identification of our human body, right? The chooser is not a part of the human body. right? It's part of our being. It's part of our consciousness, our essence. And then we have, after the chooser, we have the true self, the potential self, the spark of the divine that was given to us by the divine, however you define the divine, right? And so, here's where the medicine comes in. When we come into a medicine experience and we have thoughts and feelings and physical activities that are stirring us, they're preventing us from wanting to change and grow, right? It knows fear, protection, survival, right? The ego doesn't know love. And so when we come to work with the medicine, it's really, I think, for people who are ready to face the truth. And the truth
Oh,
is, it's up to me, and the world isn't what I thought it was. We've got a history of people, like we were going back to Gabor Mate's model of separation from trauma. Well, society, thousands of years of ego-driven society and culture and religions and all that kind of stuff created this model of the world for us. So our ego goes, this is the way it is. I can't see it, so it can't be true, right? I can't see God, so I don't know. He doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Whatever. And yet I say to them, "Can you see gravity? No. Just see the effects of it. Can you see the wind? No. You can just see the effects of it. Well, can you see love? No. But you can feel and see the effects of it. And same thing with this whole God business, right? You can't see God, but you can experience the effects of it. I mean, look at the miracles of life. So for the person who I think is in alignment or ready or more interested in this kind of path, I think it's someone that is interested in the deeper dive, who are ready to see. There was a movie, a Jack Nicholson movie, A Few Good Men, and he would say, "You can't handle the truth," right? You can't handle the
yes,
truth. Right? And many of
absolutely.
us, we could come to an ayahuasca experience and have the truth just handed to us at our feet. And then it's like it blows our circuits because it's just beyond us. One of my best friends, a dear friend, Dr. Robert Lanza, wrote the book on biocentrism and is a very famous scientist. And there was a post I saw this morning on Facebook from him, and it's all about being, the observer. You are the universe. You are the universe. And without you, guess what? Right? You're part of the all. And so, these are the mysteries that get untangled in medicine work. It's like, oh, that's so complicated with my mind, my brain. I can't conceive of it. It's like, here's a cup. This is like our brain. This is like our being, our mind, right? And then the ocean is God. The ocean is spirit. The ocean is the universe. And try to contain that, right, in a little cup, right?
Yeah, or even understand it with the limited human mind, it's
It's
really not
beyond. Yeah,
possible. And that's
yeah.
why, we are working with these amazing tools and allies like this medicine to help us, to go beyond the ego and the limited human mind, that really cannot understand a lot of the mystery that is life
Great
is.
mystery. And every
I,
culture's been using this medicine, not just ayahuasca, but the soma from the Himalayas, the monks and the brahmachari,
yeah.
the different medicine, the amanita muscaria mushroom that's been used in Siberia, all these interesting plant medicines that are available that bring in inspiration and insight. We see it's like the movie Back to Wizard of Oz. It's like you pull back the curtain. It's like, oh shit, it's this little munchkin. That's
I love that.
that's God.
I really so resonate with what you're saying, and it's like you're speaking from my heart, and it's so good to get this kind of affirmation, as well from other people who walk on the same path. Because yeah, I was very solitary for a long while in terms of I didn't know many people who work with this medicine when I began like 10 years ago. So I didn't have a lot of guidance or even people who could relate to my experience. So I really appreciate, you know, these new connections and collaborations, and that there is more information and more people now are available. And just back to, you know, the preparation and who is this medicine for. I just want to repeat what you said, that you have to have really a strong desire to heal and to change your life. Like I personally, the majority of the people I work with in my practice, they suffer from chronic disease, and for a long time they tried everything, all kinds of pharmaceutical and holistic, you know, modalities, and they still suffer and they still in pain. And one of the reason I love working with this type of people, because they have a huge commitment. You know, they are at that point that I will do anything. You know, I'm ready to face anything to change my life, to get better, you know, to feel myself again. And I think this is so important because, as you said, you are the healer, and this is almost every episode we just repeat that this plant is not a magic pill, and it's not going to heal you and make all your troubles go away. On the contrary, you know, things will get worse before they get better normally, you know, as we're going to talk about this death and rebirth process. But so the strong desire to heal and the commitment, and also the awareness that you are the healer and only you have this power, you know, the awareness that and the readiness to take that responsibility, to somehow understand that you ended up in this situation, you had something to do with it, you know. And taking that responsibility, I think it can be very challenging to some people, you know, because we are so conditioned to blame things on circumstances and other people and so on and so forth. But when you're ready to take that responsibility, I think it's so liberating, because once you say, okay, I created this, guess what? Now you can uncreate it or create something different, you know? So it's some people, I think, believe that responsibility is something not good, but actually I think it's very liberating and it's very empowering when somebody comes to this point of, yeah, I'm ready to see this, you know, and that means that I can change it, whatever is there, and that is freedom.
And that idea, that word that you use, responsibility, it's like, oh my God, it's like, I'm responsible. It's like, you know, it's like a person who's been molested by their father, their, you know, grandfather, whatever it is. It's like, how am I responsible for that? It's like, not you're responsible for the molestation, but you're responsible for your reaction to it, the way you respond to it. And I like to think of as responsibility as respond with abilities.
I love that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
use that too. The ability to respond,
The ability to
right?
respond.
Instead of react, which we talked about, that,
Right.
you know, it's a trauma response, what you are perpetuating when you are unconsciously just playing out the same scenario. And that is not freedom, you know, that is bondage, really, you know. So, so with when you gain back that ability to respond, it's really is the beginning of freedom, you know, and change in the individual's life.
I love what you're doing here, because what you're allowing this community to do is establish a common vernacular. You know, how do we relate to this stuff? We, you know, we're multidimensional beings. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, multidimensional? That's a bunch of woo-woo crap. Like, what do you mean multidimensional? And it's like, okay, so say you sit with psilocybin, right? And you have a good whack of it, you know, you can have an experience of the divine that is beyond any words that you could describe. Just like with ayahuasca or guanto or any of these medicines. And it's just like, you know, it's great to have what I think is a medicine in and of itself, and that is community. And community is as important, I think, as the medicine. It's the context that the medicine is consumed in, because we have to have some way of expressing, putting into words, owning our experience, and then finding the vernacular to share it, because we're all in this together, right? It's like, you know, we're all going through this again and again and again. And I'm one of those, you know, those people that truly believe that we're having simultaneous lifetimes, you know, multidimensional, you know, not linear, three-dimensional linear timeline type of thing, but that all of our lifetimes are happening simultaneously in past life format, type of concept. And that what we do right now is affecting not just our life, but all of our souls' lives and all of our ancestors' lives and our planet and our universe. And when we can get out of our own way, and I had I'm a Kriya Bon in Kriya Yoga, and my guru would always say, just love, 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 love. It's all about love. It's all about love, and it's like, oh, it can't be that simple, right? It can't be that simple, and I had, helped Marianne Williamson in the Course in Miracles get her first book published back in the mid '80s, and was really into the Course in Miracles. And I love the Course in Miracles because Marianne would say, "Love is the answer. What's the question?" Right? It's like, how can it be so simple? And yet sometimes I think we have to take the circuitous route to get to that point of realizing that it is that simple. I have to love my body. I have to love my brother and my sister as myself, right? And I have to vibrate at the loving vibration. And in doing
Right.
that, I can help the vibration around me raise. And my
Yeah.
body is going to reflect that mirror of who I think I am. And if I am
Yes.
love, then chances are I'm not all Mr. Poopy Pants who in the poopy diaper and all grumpy, and all that kind of stuff. That's not love, right?
Yeah.
I'm not critical. I'm not being hostile. I'm not being dishonest. There are attributes to, the end point. It's like, what's all the point of all this healing? Like, what are we doing this for? Right?
Absolutely. And my motto of my practice is really that you are the healer and love is the medicine. So I love that you bring this up. And actually, I myself spent some years with the Course in Miracles, but really what stuck in my mind as my main takeaway, what Marianne Williamson was saying as well, that the miracle is moving from fear to love. And this was so accentuated, this message with my journey with the medicine, because as we talked about, you are already love. You are a divine being of love, unconditional love. That's who you are. That's who we already are. That's not something you need to learn to be. You are, but those layers of shit that we talked about before, that is fear. I truly believe that fear is a disease, and healing is letting go of that fear. And the only way to let go is to move through it, facing your fear. And here it comes in, the medicine, the wine of the dead and the death and rebirth. And, just
and it's not the fear that walks through the door, right? It's the courage that walks through the door.
Exactly.
And the fear is close in tow, right? It's right behind you. It's always there too. But the courage is leading.
Yeah, and that shadow work that you were mentioning earlier is really working through this fear and facing these fears. And this is a very courageous act, because you or me or all of us wants to go away from fear instinctually, right? And go towards pleasure, which is just very normal. So this requires, again, a conscious voluntarily decision that no, I'm going towards that. I'm going towards the darkness. I'm going towards the fear, and I'm moving through it because I understand that this is how I can let go and return to that love, return to that wholeness. So just again, connecting back for our audience that this is not a magic pill. And, my experience was, and I was so naive, when I went to work first with this medicine, I did believe that I'm going to just, everything's going to be fine after I do this. And when I left the jungle, they said that the real work starts now. And I was like, excuse me, what are you
like
talking about?
2%. 2% on the mat, and then 98% after you go home.
Yeah, exactly. And I had no idea at that point. I was like, what are you talking about? I thought that you know, like I'm over the worst part. I mean, it was very a hardcore journey for me, you know, the training with the shipibos. I wanted to leave halfway through. I was in a complete breakdown. I'm like, send me the boat, get me home. I don't want to drink any more medicine. Thank you very much. Like, I want to leave, you know. I was in an extreme state of discomfort and darkness, and even though I was, for many years I was a healer, I had spiritual practices, so on and so forth. So it wasn't a pleasant experience. So just, you know, for our audience to understand that, okay, we're gonna laugh.
Yeah, these guys are talking so loud because, sorry. No, I'm sorry.
That's okay, we can just cut this piece.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, so what, you know, what you mentioned as well, and I think that we need to have to do a part 2 that we're gonna talk more about the integration and what does that mean and what does that shadow work mean, because it's so many juicy stuff now that I think, you know, we can't fit it into one podcast. But yeah, I just relate to this so much, this simplicity, moving from fear to love, and that ability to respond and that ability to choose in every moment. Will I act from the fear, or will I act from that love that I already...
And to go through this process compassionately, our poor ego. Think about the ego. I mean, people think, oh, the ego, let's kill the ego. Let's drink this medicine, have ego death. And it's like, no, like I love the Rachel Jameson is a modern yogini in San Diego. And she talks about it in a Vedic perspective. It's like, we need to enlighten the ego and love the ego. Think about it. This is this biological network that has been with you since the establishment of your physical presence on this planet. Right? Its whole effort has been to keep you alive and to keep your brain wired and, you know, keep you safe. And, you know, this is not, it wasn't meant to drive the bus, right? But it is. So we want to love the ego, understand it's doing its job. It's like a wild pit bull that's been mistreated its whole life, and it needs a new trainer, right? It needs to get integrated with the wisdom of the alpha energy, which is your spirit. And so that the, you know, like the training of a dog, for example, you know, it needs to have an alpha presence so that it knows that, hey, it could just sit there and lick its butt. It doesn't have to sit there and listen to every rustling wind and every, you know, UPS truck that goes by and, you know, get all, you know, into defense. You know, this is what the ego is all about. And so as we do this medicine work, you know, we bring these great insights up on the mountain, we get it in our little big glimpses of enlightenment. And we're supposed to bring that wisdom from the mountain down to back into the ground where we chop wood and carry water. Well, chop wood, carry water means integrate it into our ego, not kill our ego, but educate our ego. It's like, oh,
I
ego
love
is,
that.
yeah,
I
ego's
just resonate
driving.
with this so much because I really don't resonate with this concept that you have to get rid of your ego or kill it. Or I think you have to have an ego to exist in this world, you know?
It's a part of your physical identity. You have to
in this
have it.
context. But you know, you are so right what you're saying, that is the ego the master or the servant? You know, that's a very different question. And I think, you know, that the longest journey is from the head to the heart. You know, and this is what we are talking about, that where is your center and where do you live from, you know? And you need your mind, you need your ego, but if your heart is your driver, is the boss, you know, or I say the soul is the boss. Then you know, that's a very different experience than living from the head and living, you know, as we talked about it, that because your mind is so limited, so you are living from the limitation in your whole life, where you can live, you know, from this just expansion and this amazing beauty and power, you know, that we all have, but we just got kind of sidetracked from, in a way.
Evolution. It's really that chooser. It's really being conscious in that point where we are the chooser, and being conscious of, oh, these are my thoughts, these are my feelings, these are the thoughts that used to believe in Santa Claus. This is who's advising me about big decisions that I'm making. Wait a minute. So the chooser has to be able to distinguish between the voices it's hearing in the head. Where's the source of that voice? Oh, it's coming from my ego. Well, not a very reliable source, right? It's
Right.
usually coming from fear and protection. So
Right.
the ego is, think about it, all those voices in your ego, those are you. Those are you when you were a little girl, when you were told, be quiet, don't speak up, stop doing this. You can't be that way. You're too noisy. You're supposed to be whatever, right? Those
Right.
voices in the ego that are triggering you for protection and for safety and all that are the inner child, and you going, these are unresolved, painful experiences, and we're gonna get it again. Oh God, it's gonna hurt worse than ever. And so
Right.
it's like our response to that should be love and compassion and deep understanding, and say, I hear you, baby. Yeah, no, get in the back seat. There's no picking a fight with this guy. No, I get it. You were bullied when you were a kid. You're not going to do that again. Get back there now. Right?
Absolutely.
I'm
I
in
so
charge.
resonate with that. And I think it's remembering that we have a choice because, many people just think that way, that I don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. This is how I am. This is how things are. And when we go beyond the mind and beyond the ego and beyond, into this more expanded self, into our true self of who we are, then we start to remember that I am all powerful. Of course I have a choice,
Yeah.
of course I have a choice in every moment. And just to remember that, and I think for me it's the real test of how you're doing it is like how you're gonna be navigating your life, thanks to your experiences, because the pain won't stop, the overwhelm or the intensity of life won't stop. So what you're gonna do about it, and that's what changed for me hugely in my journey. That before, as an empath, as a very sensitive person, I would be just spiraling down, when I would have intensity and I would face intensity or adversity, it would affect me, in a negative way, and I would lose my power. And what the medicine really helped me to anchor into that powerful state, and to remember this even when I'm afraid, even when I'm in intensity, even when I'm under stress. And I think what's happening in the world, this is just, almost like a master class for me. And I was like saying a friend of mine that, like, I feel like I am in an ayahuasca ceremony 24/7, the
Yes,
last
it's true.
year and a half. And this just that constant application of what I know to be true, and to remember each moment that I do have a choice. I do have a choice of how do I respond in any given situation, and that I am something bigger. I am not that fear. I am not that anger. I am not that low self-esteem. I am something bigger that can hold all that with love, as you said, in a loving, compassionate way. And I can say to myself, it's okay that I'm afraid, right now, and I can hold that fear like I would hold a baby, with that love and compassion, and remember that this shall too pass, right?
Yeah.
And
Right. Yeah, and really give it the support that it needs. Yeah. We're doing these retreats down here with the community, and it starts with preparation, and we spend time having these conversations in advance. It's like, like I mentioned, community is a medicine. Well, that starts by people coming together and having the courage to speak honestly about who they are, where they're at, right, and why they're being called to the medicine, or what they want from the medicine. And when anybody is, I think, contemplating doing work with medicine, I think it's important to know who you're traveling with, who are your compadres that are there with you. And when, like we're with the jungle medicine retreat that we do here, that's part of the experience, having community building experiences, going to the waterfalls and going down the river in a hand carved canoe, and planting ayahuasca, harvesting ayahuasca, making ayahuasca. These are all collectively done, gathering firewood, replacing what we've taken from the jungle and replacing it. And so these are components that build community and allow people the chance to start to talk and share. because this is what's missing, connection.
Absolutely. I so resonate with that. And that's why I'm also doing this integration work. I'm doing this podcast because I was, I was trying to figure this out for a number of years, because what you mentioned as well, that we have this cultural divide, where the medicine is coming from. That's a different world for us. A shamanic worldview is completely different from a Western worldview. So I was like, why the shippy boss didn't talk to me about integration? I was wondering of that. And then I understood that they don't need integration. They are in the integration because they are in the land, they are in the community, they live there, they are with people who understand this, they have history, they have heritage. So we need integration in the West because we come from a completely different context, either to work with this medicine or the medicine comes to us, it doesn't matter, and then we go back or we stay in these different contexts when we cannot relate, with our experiences. What just happened to me? Who I can talk to? Like, nobody can relate to what you went through. Nobody understands what does that entail, what is this whole world is about. So I just that's why we are doing all these conversations to make people aware, that for us in the West, it's very needed that we prepare, and then we have integration, and we understand these things that an indigenous person doesn't have to understand, because they understood it when they were 2 years old, like, so it's just so different for us. And this episode is be more, talked about the preparation. So just to recap for our audience, so the calling, if you are listening to this podcast, probably that's part of your calling, you are exploring this topic, having a strong desire to heal or to change your life, for some personal reason, having courage, to face your fears, and being willing and open to take full responsibility for your life and for your experience. So I think these are very crucial that people can think about or can do. And then beyond that, what you mentioned, do your research, do your research, connect with people who did this, not just necessarily your friend who went to a ceremony and had one experience and now suddenly he or she is an expert, but talk to professional people like Dr. Scott, like myself, organizations, people who are into this for a while and have experience, ask them, have personal consultations, and then once, all of this is lined up, then you can go into the physical preparation and setting an intention. And that's also something we talk about other episodes, setting an intention and how important it is to have a clear intention and how that will shape your journey, and your experience, with this beautiful plant ally. So these are some things, to consider definitely when somebody is contemplating, to go down this path. And just to wrap it up for today, I always say to people, when you say yes to this journey, the medicine is already connected to you and working with you. So that's why I do pre-sessions with people to work through material that is arising before the journey. So what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's what we do here too. I've been doing this with SoulQuest for 5 years. With we had the 20,000 people come through there, so we ironed out the flow really well, the preparation process, and then for folks that come to the retreats that I'm doing down here in Ecuador, and they can find out that information by going to junglemedicineretreat.com, not with an S, junglemedicineretreat.com. And what we do is integration. Well, we do the prep work, but then integration during the experience. So, we do 11-day retreat. We have 7-day retreats. We've got custom retreats. There's an apprenticeship that's available for folks who are interested in learning more about facilitating and how to, gain a greater perspective from the Kichwa perspective. These experiences are really have built into them integration. So you do 4 ayahuasca ceremonies and 11-day retreat. You have the option to do those. There's integration between after each one of those. So you got to have some kind of like way of trying to put into words your own experience. Like for some people, they don't have a voice at home. Nobody listens to them, or in their life, it's like they're just nobody cares, right? And so we work on creating a really safe container where people feel they're unconditionally supported with a loving group that says, you know, hey, you're great just the way you are. Just know we're safe here. And people start talking about stuff that comes up in their medicine work. I can tell you, I think 50% of the population has been molested. I mean, it's unbelievable how large the number of people, the numbers are with people. And so sometimes it's very difficult to admit that happened. And so trust within that small circle in your integration group helps you to begin to put into words what your experience was, and then to own it. It's like, it's actually happened. You know, it was a traumatic childhood. It did cause, so much physical pain. And it's like, I did, whatever. I was in the battlefield and I did kill, 20 people, whatever these traumas are. It's so important to be able to own that, share that, speak that truth in a context that's naturally therapeutic, loving, and supportive. So,
Definitely.
and we
The
see
community.
ourselves, our mirror. Everyone's a mirror to us. And so
Yeah, and
someone's going,
also I think, that you become aware because, I remember my own experience that for a long time I thought only I suffer in the world. Everybody else is happy, I'm alone. And then, actually being a therapist was very therapeutic for me to get a perspective on my pain and my suffering, and then just to realize that all of us are suffering. So suddenly, you don't feel so alone, you don't feel so isolated. It helps to, like, this is not to diminish anybody's trauma or experience, obviously, or there is no comparison here. It's just the fact that, we are in the same boat. As you said, we all do suffer, and to listen to each other and to create safe places where we can share is part of the healing, the acknowledgement that, yeah, this happens, that it's like almost like in the AA, you have to come to the point that you acknowledge that there is something wrong, otherwise you cannot even begin to heal, and that's
right.
when people are in denial. And I know many people who are like, no, I'm fine, there is no problem, but look at their lives, and then you see that there are problems, but they are not even ready to acknowledge that, yeah, something is not working and some change is needed. So this is so
Then at some point, sorry to interrupt you, at some point, we have to put all that happened into a kind of perspective where all that tragedy becomes treasure. I wouldn't change 1 second of my life. I think of all the negative experiences as like a bow and arrow, and all that negative stuff is like that force that pulls back, the negative force that pulls back that string in that bow. And what does it do? Once we release it, like in an ayahuasca ceremony, we actually let it go. It launches an arrow into an entirely new target in our lives that we couldn't get there without all of this. Right? It's like when I think about you as a therapist as well, we know that our pain and suffering gives us x-ray vision into other people's pain and suffering. And so this becomes our seasoning. What good would you be being a fluffy white angel? Right?
Yeah, and I totally, I so resonate with turning our challenges into gifts. And I think Joseph Campbell with the hero's journey, it's such a beautiful approach to this, how you go through this whole journey, and then you receive that gift, that gem, in the end of your journey, and then you share it, that's the service, you share it, you share it with the world, you share it with others, and help others to turn their challenges into gifts. And I certainly experienced this like so many times with the help of this beautiful plant ally. So I think it's a good wrap up for our conversation for today. So before we finish up, we're going to share all your information and all your offerings in the description of the video, and we're going to do a part 2 if you are up for it, when we more dive into the integration and what happens after, because it's just so many things to talk about. So do you have anything that you would like to express right now, or any message that you want to send out into the world to our audience?
Oh, well, first I want to thank you for inviting me on today. And you know what I do is really in an effort to help communicate that there is help out there. There are all kinds of paths to healing. And you know, it breaks my heart when I feel like there's someone out there suffering and who does not know that there is an option like this available. And I'm not one of those people that go out there on shouting it from the rooftops and that sort of thing. You know, I think that it's important for us to live and walk the walk and talk the talk, and you know, and to really express the universal teachings of Mother Ayahuasca in our deeds and actions. And so, you know, in sharing this information with anybody who's out there, I know that there are people out there who are at the end of their rope and they think that there is nothing else left for me except for to kill myself. And I know this because at Soul Quest every weekend we'd have people that would come to us that would tell us that on Sunday after they did their, you know, 2 or 3 ayahuasca ceremonies. And then they would say, I don't want to die anymore. And they would have a reconnection, some kind of conversion experience. And so if you're at the end of your rope, you know, it's like you're in the jungle, like Tarzan. It's like, let's grab another rope. Let's keep swinging, right? And one of these things that we can do with ayahuasca is, you know, is really spread the word. If you know somebody that's in trouble, if you see something, say something. And maybe it's just, you know, share with them if you want our Netflix, you know, documentary, you know, which is really great at explaining, you know, what ayahuasca is and
What's the
in an
title
American.
for that? Do you
It's,
know?
it's called Unwell, and it's
Okay.
episode 5. And there was also another documentary that was done that was called From Shock to Awe. And it was about veterans with PTSD. And, you know, we have a special program at Jungle Medicine Retreats for our veterans and those that are struggling who cannot afford to come. We have benefactors that have provided scholarships so they can come to the Amazon for free. We pay for their airfare and their retreats while they're here so they can get the deep healing that they need. So you're not, if you're out there and you're struggling, just know that there are people who have experienced this medicine just like in situations where you're at that can get help, where they can share it with you. So reach out to us. Reach out to
Yes,
Nina.
thank you. Yeah, reach out to both of us, and remember that help is always available. And if you do not need help, but you can give back something, please be there in that capacity for these projects, for these people, you know, for these communities who are growing the medicine and taking care of this heritage and this beautiful way of healing. So we're going to share all the links for that. And just remember that you are the healer and love is the medicine. So stay tuned for our next episode, and sending lots of love to you all.